General Hospital revealed that Willow had once believed, with unwavering certainty, that Michael would be emotionally shattered beyond repair after she left him for Drew. She assumed that the weight of her betrayal would bury him in despair, that he would spiral into loneliness, tormented by the pieces of a life they had carefully constructed and then watched crumble. She thought he would flounder in the void left behind. Struggling to co-parent, fumbling through legal chaos, and longing for a love he'd never fully reclaim. To her, Michael was meant to become a monument to what she had chosen to abandon, a man wounded, perhaps angry, but ultimately frozen in the past. It gave her a strange sense of power, this image of him suffering while she seemingly moved on with control and confidence, tethered to a new chapter with Drew and fueled by the illusion that she had made the right decision. But everything changed the moment she saw him with Sasha. Willow didn't expect the spark, the laughter, the gentle ease with which Michael looked at Sasha again, not as a ghost of the past, but as a woman he was proud to love in the present. She didn't anticipate that the same Sasha she had once dismissed as broken or unstable would now be standing beside Michael with a newborn child in her arms, surrounded by the very family Willow once claimed as her own. Watching Michael hold that baby, his eyes shining with a tenderness and pride that Willow had not seen in months, was like being hit by a tidal wave. Something inside her cracked, not from heartbreak over lost love, but from a seething envy, a suffocating realization that she had lost more than she had gambled. She wasn't just watching a man move on, she was watching him heal without her, thrive in a way she never imagined he could. It made her question whether she had ever truly known him at all, or if she had merely known the version of him she wanted to control. What made it worse, infinitely worse, was that Sasha had once been her friend. A confidant. Someone she had pitied, someone she had forgiven. Someone she had never thought of as competition. And yet now, Sasha was the one who had everything, the man, the family, the future. Willow told herself that it wasn't about Michael. It wasn't about love. It was about balance, about restoring her sense of worth, about correcting a narrative she could no longer recognize as her own. Because if Sasha could rise from the ashes of addiction, grief, and scandal to become the mother of Michael's child and the center of his joy, what did that say about Willow's own choices? Her ego recoiled at the thought. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. So, with the cold precision of someone who felt cornered by fate, Willow began to plot. Not out of love, but out of fury. Quietly, cautiously, she started to position herself back into Michael's orbit under the guise of concern for the children. She made subtle comments to family members about Sasha's past, carefully laced with faux sympathy. She planted seeds of doubt with anyone who might have influence over custody arrangements. She explored legal loopholes, pretending it was to ensure the children's best interests while inwardly calculating how best to chip away at Sasha's credibility. Willow knew exactly where to strike: Sasha's history with substance abuse, her public breakdowns, the scandals, the chaos. She wasn't trying to win Michael back, she had no romantic illusions about that anymore. She simply couldn't stomach the idea that Sasha had found the kind of redemption and peace that Willow herself had forfeited. In private, her relationship with Drew began to suffer. He noticed the way she seemed distracted, her questions about Michael's household, her veiled criticisms of Sasha's fitness as a mother. But when he pushed, she deflected. Because deep down, Willow wasn't just mourning the end of a marriage, she was mourning the loss of her identity as Michael's chosen one. She had once believed that she could leave and still be the sun in his orbit, but now it was clear. She had become just another name in a chapter Michael had already closed. And that truth was the hardest pill to swallow. The courtroom had been charged with tension from the moment Sasha took the stand, but nothing could have prepared anyone for the chaos that erupted when, without warning, she doubled over in pain, clutching her belly. Gasps rippled through the gallery, papers dropped, voices rose in alarm, and within seconds, the entire room descended into disarray. The judge, stunned by the sudden turn of events, banged his gavel and called an immediate recess, but even his order to halt proceedings could not contain what was unfolding before their eyes. Sasha was going into labor, right there, in the middle of a high-stakes custody hearing, in front of lawyers, court officers, reporters, and family members. The medical team had already been summoned, but traffic delays meant they would not arrive in time. And in that frantic moment, amid the marble floors and formal robes, time seemed to collapse. Willow, despite the emotional entanglements of the past, instinctively rushed forward. Her training as a nurse overrode everything else. This was no longer about betrayal, broken marriages, or courtroom manipulation. This was about life and death. With calm urgency, she dropped to her knees beside Sasha, took command of the scene, and began guiding her through the process with firm, practiced hands. Sasha, caught between overwhelming pain and raw fear, was barely able to register what was happening, but Michael's presence, kneeling beside her, his hand clenched tightly around hers, anchored her in the storm. He whispered words of comfort, his voice cracking with emotion, telling her she could do this, that he was right there, that everything would be okay. Tears streamed down Michael's face as he watched Sasha struggle, her body racked with contractions, sweat glistening on her brow. And through it all, he never let go. He looked at her not as someone from a painful past, but as the woman who was now delivering a piece of his future. The echo of her cries mixed with the murmurs of the shocked courtroom, until finally, a piercing, perfect wail cut through the air. It was the sound of new life, raw and real. A baby girl, born not in a hospital room surrounded by sterile white walls, but on the cold floor of a courthouse, wrapped in coats and blankets hurriedly gathered by bystanders. The judge, silent and wide-eyed, sat frozen in disbelief. Michael was speechless as he held his daughter for the first time, cradling her tiny body against his chest. He had witnessed many life-altering moments in his young life, but none had ever hit him with such force. It was as if the world had stopped and reshaped itself around this one, single moment. Everything else, the trial, the legal maneuvering, the betrayals, the drama, faded into a distant blur. What remained was the weight of the child in his arms and the woman beside him who had just given her life. In that moment, something irrevocable changed within Michael. He looked at Sasha not as an echo of what once was, but as the anchor of what could be. He remembered the woman who had once loved him so fiercely that she sacrificed her own happiness to ensure Wiley's safety. He saw the resilience in her, how she had survived the loss of a child, a mental health crisis, and relentless public scrutiny. And now here she was, delivering their daughter under the most harrowing of circumstances, with courage and grace that humbled him. It was as if fate had brought them full circle, not to repeat the past, but to redeem it. Michael knew then that he didn't want to live another day pretending his heart wasn't already committed. He confessed to Sasha that he wanted to build a life with her, not out of obligation or nostalgia, but out of a deep recognition that she was the person he wanted by his side through the madness of life. With Wiley and Amelia already part of his world, and now this newborn child tying them together in the most profound way, he envisioned a home. One filled with laughter, stability, and healing. Not perfect, not untouched by scars, but real. Carly, who had watched it all unfold from the edge of the gallery, felt a swell of emotion rise within her. She had always seen something in Sasha that others missed, an unwavering loyalty, a quiet strength, a heart that refused to break even when bruised. And now, seeing Sasha cradle Michael's daughter, with Michael by her side, Carly understood that this wasn't just a moment of emotional clarity. It was the start of something deeply rooted, something that might finally bring peace to her often turbulent family. Without making a grand speech, without forcing her approval, she simply stepped back and let the bond between Michael and Sasha solidify, knowing full well that they would need time and space to nurture this new beginning. But not everyone welcomed the shift in dynamics with open arms. Outside the courtroom, beneath the mask of calm, a storm brewed in Willow's heart. She had done her duty, helped bring a child into the world, and now stood silently watching the man she once loved be reborn before her eyes, reborn through someone else. The joy in Michael's face, the way he looked at Sasha, the sense of family they now embodied, it was all too much. Willow turned away before anyone could see the tremble in her lip, before anyone could sense the rage simmering just beneath her gratitude. The woman who once thought she held all the power now stood powerless, watching the story she believed she had authored take on a new narrative, one where she was no longer the heroine, but the outsider. And so, while Michael basked in the glow of his daughter's first breath and Sasha clung to the miracle they had just experienced, a darker chapter was quietly being written. One in which envy, bitterness, and resentment would test the very foundation of this newfound family. Because even as life brought them together in the most unexpected of ways, the shadows of past choices and fractured loyalties were still waiting, just beyond the courtroom doors. Willow, once the beloved wife of Michael, found herself spiraling into a dark abyss of bitterness and denial as she struggled to reconcile with the new reality unfolding before her eyes. It wasn't just that Michael had moved on, it was how swiftly and effortlessly he seemed to let go of everything they once shared. Their love, their marriage, the bond they had painstakingly built through adversity and loss, it all seemed to evaporate the moment Sasha stepped back into his orbit. And while Willow had been the one to walk away, choosing Drew in a haze of resentment and misplaced desire for freedom, she never truly imagined that Michael would recover, let alone rebuild his life with someone else. Especially not with Sasha. The fact that it was Sasha, of all people, who had managed to reclaim Michael's heart was salt in a wound Willow hadn't yet admitted was bleeding. Sasha had once been a troubled soul, a woman haunted by addiction, depression, and public scandal. She had impersonated Nina's daughter, been caught in a web of lies, and fallen apart in ways that had become headlines. Willow saw herself as the stable one, the safe one, the woman who had held Michael up during his darkest days. And now, watching Sasha take her place not just beside Michael but in the lives of Wiley, Amelia, and the newborn child, sent her into a spiral of emotional warfare she was no longer equipped to fight with grace. Fueled by jealousy and a deep sense of failure, Willow began to orchestrate a campaign of quiet sabotage. She started planting seeds of doubt in the minds of those closest to Michael. With carefully worded comments cloaked in false concern, she revived the worst parts of Sasha's history, her drug addiction, her psychological breakdowns, her deception about Nina, all weaponized to paint a picture of instability and danger. She framed her words as protective instincts, reminding others that Sasha's past wasn't just a memory but a pattern that could resurface at any time, particularly in the high-pressure world of motherhood and public scrutiny. But it wasn't enough to simply poison the minds of the Corinthos and Quartermain inner circles. Willow needed a more direct method of destabilizing Sasha's place in Michael's life. She quietly reactivated her contacts with the family's former custody attorney, exploring legal pathways to revisit guardianship agreements for Wiley and Amelia. She argued, in hushed tones behind closed doors, that Michael's judgment might be compromised by emotions, by infatuation, and that the children's well-being required oversight. She even manipulated Drew, positioning him as a concerned partner, encouraging him to question Michael's sudden shift in priorities and pressuring him to engage Michael in conversations laced with veiled accusations. Unwittingly, Drew became a pawn in her silent war, a war Michael never saw coming. Unbeknownst to Willow, each strategic move she made was slowly corroding the last vestiges of compassion and humility that had once defined her. The lines between love, regret, and revenge blurred until she could no longer recognize her own reflection. She had become someone she once judged, a woman incapable of letting go, obsessed not with love, but with control. Meanwhile, Sasha, who had spent years being pushed and pulled between love and obligation, began to transform in ways no one could have predicted. For so long, she had been defined by sacrifice, by silence, by the shadows of choices made for others. But this time, with a child in her arms and Michael by her side, she found clarity. She was no longer the woman who would step aside to protect others. She was the mother of Michael's child, the nurturer of a bond that no longer needed to hide or apologize for existing. For the first time, Sasha believed she had the right to fight for her place, not out of desperation, but out of dignity. She moved into Michael's home with confidence. Not to play house or prove a point, but to build something real. She ignored the whispers, the sideways glances, the silent judgment of those who still clung to old narratives about who she had once been. And every night, when she looked into Michael's eyes, she saw not just the man who had forgiven her, but the man who had been reborn through their shared pain and mutual resilience. Their love wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, forged in the fire of loss and solidified in the joy of new beginnings. But that fragile piece began to crack the moment Willow discovered that Michael had listed Sasha as the secondary guardian on their newborn daughter's medical forms. To Willow, it was more than a formality, it was confirmation that she had been permanently replaced. The realization struck her like lightning, and for the first time, she could no longer pretend to be composed. She stormed into Carly's office, fuming with betrayal and fury, demanding answers, demanding to know how Sasha had become the chosen one. Her voice trembled as she accused Carly of favoring Sasha, of always seeing her as the better woman despite everything Willow had sacrificed for the Corinthos family. But Carly, long past the days of sugar-coated diplomacy, responded with calm resolve. She reminded Willow that betrayal has consequences. That love, once broken, can't always be repaired just because one regrets their choice. She told Willow that Sasha had never stopped putting others before herself, even when it cost her everything. That when Willow turned away from Michael, it was Sasha who stepped forward, not with manipulation or deceit, but with patience, with understanding, and ultimately, with love. Carly didn't need to defend Sasha. Sasha had done that herself. With actions, with strength, and with the grace of a woman who had nothing left to prove. As Willow stood there, seething and speechless, it became clear that the battle she thought she was waging against Sasha was really a war within herself, a desperate attempt to reclaim something she had freely given away. And the tragedy of it all was that the more she fought to tear Sasha down, the further she buried the very pieces of herself she once believed made her worthy of Michael's love. Willow increasingly found herself alone in the very game she had set into motion. The web of manipulation she had so carefully spun began to unravel, and with each passing day, the isolation she once believed gave her power instead became a prison of her own making. Drew, once her refuge and supposed fresh start, began to sense a shift in her. He noticed the shadows in her words, the subtle bitterness in her tone, and he couldn't ignore the way her focus always seemed to drift back to Michael and Sasha. Doubt crept into his thoughts, and the emotional distance between them grew wider with every unanswered question and every half-hearted excuse. What had once seemed like a promising new chapter for Willow and Drew now felt more like a forced alliance, built on resentment rather than real connection. Meanwhile, in sharp contrast, Michael and Sasha were quietly weaving together something real, something unshakable. Each day spent caring for their newborn daughter only strengthened the bond between them. They didn't rely on grand gestures or flowery declarations of love. What connected them was far deeper. The look of mutual respect shared during late-night feedings, the silent understanding exchanged during moments of exhaustion, the sense of safety that came from knowing they could lean on each other without explanation. For Michael, the realization came not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet certainty that Sasha was his true partner, not someone to strategize with or compete against, but someone to protect and build with. She wasn't his past mistake. She was his present anchor and his future hope. Their story was anything but easy. It had been forged through fire, tempered by loss, betrayal, grief, and regret. Yet every tear they shed, every shock they endured, and every misstep they made was slowly forming the bricks of something lasting. What began as chaos in a courtroom had become the unlikely foundation for a family rooted not in perfection, but in truth. This was not a love based on fantasy or idealism. It was a love proven in action, born of resilience, and sustained by trust. And that, more than anything else, was what Willow could never destroy, no matter how hard she tried.